Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are talking about the transition to cloud ERP and how to assess your organization's needs. Enavate is the sponsor of this episode, and as Jennifer and Chad explained, their team has been investing a lot of time and effort into making sense of the move from legacy ERP to the cloud and specifically to Business Central. For partners and customers, a move to Business Central may feel like a moving target, and that's partly because it is. Like all cloud software, Business Central gets updates throughout the year with semi-annual release waves and ongoing improvements that align it with other Microsoft services like Teams, Office 365, and Azure services. At the same time, ISVs are adapting and rolling out new solutions of their own. It can be a lot to take in, and my guests explain the ways they try to improve the process and make projects more successful. Some of that is in the form of assessment tools, but process also matters. For example, Enavate runs a migration factory in partnership with Microsoft. And other partners take advantage of that model to streamline their own projects and focus on other value-added elements with their clients like new features, ISV selection, or automation. And we discuss why the outcome of a move to BC should ultimately be better than the legacy system. It's a topic that seems obvious, but can be curiously challenging to measure. All right, well, hi, Jen. Hi, Chad. Thanks for joining me today. It's great to have you.
Great to be here, Jason.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us.
For you, Chad, I guess this is a welcome back. I actually should have counted before, but I think you've been on the podcast at least a couple times at this point.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so it's great to have you back. And hey, Jen, can you maybe give a little introduction to our listeners?
Yeah, so my name's Jennifer Ranz, and I work on the EPS product team here at Enavate. And I started at Enavate back in December of 2020. And before that, I worked at Microsoft in the research development, focusing on the GP product line and Business Central.
All right, excellent. Well, welcome. Glad to have you with us. It's always great to talk about some of the issues that customers are facing, especially customers with sort of either a lot of legacy solutions or really a mixed environment. I wanted to maybe set the stage for our conversation in terms of maybe some of the advice that you're giving either to customers or out in the channel in the work that you're both doing. And we could maybe use that as a way to understand a little more about exactly what kind of work you are doing and conversations that you're having. If you're talking to customers today, I'm guessing a lot of them have this mix of different kinds of systems and are reaching a decision point that might have started with different kinds of triggering events or challenges that have arisen over time. Maybe you have some SaaS systems, some older legacy systems that are 5-10 years old or more. If I'm a customer in that situation, like what's motivating me to think about modernizing and what should partners be talking to that kind of organization about?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Jason. So here at Enavate, when we're speaking to clients, we have a lot of clients that are traditional on-premise SMB clients of Microsoft. So they're using Dynamics GP, Dynamics NAV, Dynamics SL. And they're in different stages of the life cycle of that journey. Some of them are pretty current on the solution. Some of them have been on the solution for multiple years. And when we talk about events or triggers or things like that, what we most frequently hear is I'm hearing a lot, this isn't a client speak, I'm hearing a lot about an integrated solution and, of course, the digital transformation. But what does that actually mean? And what can my business benefit from an integrated cloud solution? And the conversation becomes pretty easy to have because a lot of those clients are using things like Office 365. So they're already realizing the benefit of that collaborative space, collaborative tools like Teams, any of the capabilities of sharing and having instant messaging and things of that nature. When we start to talk about leveraging that SaaS model with their business solutions and what they could do from an anywhere, anytime, any device access standpoint, it really starts to make a little more sense in terms of, okay, I get that value point. And particularly with the last year and what the world's gone through with the pandemic and having so much of their business have to work from home. And how have they been able to manage that? Some of that has been, of course, they've stayed on-prem and they've used technologies to try to virtual desktop in. But a lot of it is realizing that if I'm in a SaaS environment, all I need is a browser and I can do that pretty easily. So we talk a lot about that and a lot about access to the information, but more so when you're then in that SaaS environment or that cloud environment with your business solution, the way that you can leverage Power Platform and the simplicity of having that data be readily available in Power BI and then embedded back in, the way that you can build a Power App as a very low code, no code point solution for your organization to do a particular task. It becomes so much more simple when you're working from a cloud to a cloud type of environment. And that's part of what we see when we're talking to people about the digital transformation and when we're talking to clients about why it's important for them.
Okay. And I can certainly understand that. Are there certain things that are certain lessons or observations that you see companies making that where the light bulb goes off? Because I'm doing this in Office 365 with other people in my organization, because we're doing this kind of collaboration in Teams, for example, now I start to see the benefits of, an integrated business solution.
I think you hit on one of the biggest things right there. And Microsoft recently came out with their Teams integration for Business Central as an example, where directly in a Teams conversation, you can type in and share information about a client. You can share information about a receivable that you have, and it's very automatic. Of course, it persists your security, so you're not seeing things you shouldn't, but it's a much, much easier way to collaborate with your other team members in the organization when you need to solve a problem very quickly. That journey began a couple of years ago when we embedded Business Central within Outlook, for example. There's a lot of Word documents. You can then take Excel and you can not only export data to Excel, but more importantly, you can modify data in Excel and push that back into your cloud solution. And so you start to add up those different features that people are familiar with from an Excel, Outlook, Teams perspective and show how that resonates within the business management solution. And it really starts to create the light bulb moment, the aha moment for those business users and those business decision makers of how I can simplify the day in and day out tasks and help my team collaborate so we can improve our efficiency.
Jen, what's your perspective when you think about sort of what are the quick benefits or the early benefits that a company is going to get from moving to Business Central, whether it's from, and maybe it's a different answer, whether it's from moving from a Dynamics NAV or a Dynamics GP or some other, third-party legacy system. But what are some of the benefits that you really tend to focus on?
Just like Chad was saying, some of the things he talked about just in the integrated cloud solution itself is incorporated right into Business Central. So like he talked about the seamless integration. If I've been using Power BI and I've got reports that I share out within my organization, the great thing is that's right there on my role center. So when I launch into Business Central, all that data is available right in the product for me. I don't have to, close out or move open to a different browser and open Power BI. It's just right there on my desktop within the application. Being able to, easily do things not only in a web page, but to do that on my phone or a tablet. So like if I'm out of my home office or if I'm just not at the office in general, I can use my phone to quickly get that same information. Just makes it so much more flexible. And I think, like Chad said earlier, having the times that we're in with COVID, having that flexibility to not have to be in an office, but still have that information available to me. When I talk to customers about Business Central and some of the top 10 things that they say, one of the big things in Business Central is dimensions and being able to slice and dice the information right within some of my reports. So if I want to see a breakdown possibly by divisions or departments, that information's super easy to get to because when I post the transactions, that data is there. So now if I want to say, okay, how much did my accounting department have for office expenses? I don't have to go create a report. I just put a filter on a list right within Business Central. It's all that stuff is right there without having to really do anything. The other thing too that Chad talked about was that edit in Excel. Everybody loves Excel. Everybody finds it so much easier to look at budgets, enter information. Well, now I can do that same thing right within Business Central where I can open up my budgets in Excel, make some quick changes. Maybe I want to up my expenses across the board by 10%. I can do that easily in Excel and then push that data right back into Business Central with just a click of a button. I don't have to go in and manually open each one of those budget records and make those changes. So just some of the really quick things from a feature standpoint. Also, a nice thing about Business Central and being in that SaaS environment, as Microsoft gets feedback from their customers about what they want to see within the product, those features can get rolled out in monthly updates, in the 6-month updates. And a customer now doesn't have to be scheduling an upgrade to get those features and functionality. That gets pushed out monthly within monthly cadences or those 6-month cadences. And they can literally come in on a Monday morning and have a new feature within their application without having to do anything.
Yeah, that's a big change from the world of on-prem and updates that were coming out, at most every 12 months for most customers?
Yep, exactly.
And that was actually, that to me sounds fairly fast. So, how do you actually make the case on an individual, if you're talking to an individual, company, organization, or if you're, coaching another partner on how to do an assessment? Like, what are some of the assessment steps that would go into actually building a case or helping an organization build a case for moving forward?
One of the things that we are doing at Enavate is we're really working and focusing on our GP customers. We've had a lot of customers that have come to us and, are looking to go to the cloud. And so they know that there's an option out there of Business Central. So we have created an assessment tool that we are using internally to kind of help those customers determine how easy it would be for them to move to Business Central. So we're doing some analysis on like their version, the type of SQL server they're running, and also the features and functionalities that they're using inside of Dynamics GP. One thing is, you always know what you've sold to your customer. You know that you've sold them GP. You know that the modules that you've helped implement, but you might not necessarily know that 2 months ago, they decided to start using another feature inside of the GP product. So our assessment tool will actually go out and not only see what they've got installed for either third parties, ISVs, but then how they're using that data inside of GP. So we can take that assessment and then we can kind of map it to the migration tool that's available in Business Central and say, hey, we can tell by what you're using inside of GP and what the migration tool has, and we can help them build out that plan to move from the GP on-prem product to the Business Central SaaS product.
I think what's interesting about that, if I could add to that, Jen really explained the power of that assessment. And no doubt, it's very powerful in terms of helping the client and the partner understand exactly what is provisioned in that environment, what they're utilizing on a GP module basis, ISV basis, etc. And though it's quite powerful, it is very, very simple to use. Our goal was that there should be less than a 5-minute activity. So it may sound daunting, but it really isn't. The way that we've designed that is a 10-question form that either the user or our account executive, either one can enter the information, and then we package up and send an EXE file over for them to run against their database, which we've seen that done in 30 seconds. We've seen it take up to 2 minutes if you have a terabyte of data in your system. So it does a lot of work, but it's very, very simple to take that assessment. And then we're able to take that assessment and start to qualify against package offerings. And so Microsoft has done a good job with the Migration Factory partners. There are 5 of them available on Business Central. And we're here, Enavate being one of them, we're here to help clients, whether that be partners or customers, to migrate their data. And each of us has put together a basic offering for migration. So if that assessment tool runs and you fit into that basic offering, you can have a fixed fee, fixed time implementation from GP to Business Central. And that's really the heart of what we tried to accomplish with the assessment tool. Is it can do a lot of things, but it is super simple to run. And you don't need to think about, okay, I should plan a week or a month to assess my readiness. It's really a matter of a short amount of time to run the tool and get an idea of where you sit in your relative readiness for Business Central.
I can think of a few, key questions when it comes to thinking about moving to Business Central. Some of those things that you've discussed are obviously a big part of it. But I would also think, how much time will this project take? Well, why don't we start with that? Is that one of the big questions? Like, what kind of project am I looking at here?
I think that's a really good point. And again, it'll all depend on like the kind of information we get back on the assessment tool. But what we've also done is not only do we get that assessment, but we kind of look at all the data and then put it into 3 different categories. So green, which kind of falls into that bucket that Chad was talking about. And then there's a yellow bucket, and then there's a red bucket. And when we look at that yellow bucket, we know that that's not, it won't be a quick run of the migration tool and then the customer's up and running. It might be, we can use that migration tool, but then we need to do a couple of additional things to make sure that that customer's data gets into Business Central and they're ready to go. So we do have, that timing take into account as well. But with that assessment tool, that can kind of drive those conversations with the customer. And the great thing with the assessment tool as well is that doesn't mean that just because the customer ran it, that they have to be ready to do it. That's when they can have those conversations. They can talk internally. They can determine, even on a budgeting standpoint, maybe they're not ready to go to Business Central, but now they can kind of take a step back, look to see what it'll take from a timing perspective. Maybe, summertime is their downtime for their business, and that would be a great time to do the migration process. Maybe summer is a terrible time, and so they want to wait and do that back in the fall or the winter time frame. So running that assessment really gives that customer the ability to start thinking and driving those types of decisions.
I can imagine an assessment also just maybe leads to some, introspection or just maybe other discussion inside of an organization about what their priorities really are for undergoing the project when they actually do make the decision to move ahead. Have you seen those kinds of, debates or conversations as a result of the assessment?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jason. We've absolutely seen that debate because you end up with a relatively clear picture, as Jen said, of what kind of time frame, what kind of dollars you're talking about to make that change. And listen, we know everybody's running a business, so there's a decision point to be made of, do I want to spend, I'll use an example of $30,000 to upgrade my business management system, or do I want to buy one more piece of equipment for my business? And those are the conversations that it starts to get into. What is the TCO? What's the payback? And one of the unique things that Enavate offers is we offer the ability to pay for that on a subscription basis. So you don't have to come up with that upfront fee. And that does become a very interesting conversation point with a client that wants to make both decisions on equipment for their business and an upgrade, because you can spread that out over a 3-year term, for example. And I think the other thing that we've seen it lead to, Jason, is that conversation. Jen mentioned the green and the yellow and the red. And the green is a pretty straightforward conversation. The yellow can be relatively straightforward because it might be 1 or 2 ISVs that don't match that you need to decide on. Red is where we really start to see a more detailed conversation between the partner and the client. And a good example of that for GP to Business Central would be a manufacturing client that's using GP manufacturing. That's not built into the migration tools today. It doesn't match up necessarily. They're different. And so there becomes a real conversation about, okay, do you want to take and revamp your manufacturing processes and set up Business Central the way that it's designed? Because it is different than GP. Or as a migration factory partner, such as Enavate, we also have a hosting service that we host in Azure. So there becomes that conversation, a point of now you're on a cloud journey. You may not be ready yet to move 100% to the cloud solution, but we can host that entire infrastructure. We can put you into Azure on a hosted service, and then you continue your journey over whatever period of time, 2 years, etc., 3 years. So the conversation gets interesting quickly because certainly you can make that move right away. You may have you may want to spread that out over a payment plan, or you may want to go to a hosted service first, and then eventually find your way to either F&O or Business Central.
Yeah, can you say more about sort of the decision to maybe have a multi-step journey into some kind of a hosted approach? Like what models have you seen working, and what choices have you seen there? Chad, I guess maybe I'll start with you on that.
When it comes to that multi-step journey, the first thing is Microsoft offers a wonderful package to move to CSP. So you can move to a cloud solution provider model and change your subscription from a one-time a year to a monthly payment plan. And then with CSP, now you have the opportunity to have your current on-premise solution plus access to your cloud solution. So in terms of the journey can be fast. You can try out Business Central for a week or a month, and then you can move through either the green or yellow phase. Or if you're in that red phase, you can still move to that subscription model, and then you move your GP environment into a hosted solution from a company like Enavate while you are looking at Business Central, evaluating Business Central, but you have the rights to both. You have the rights to the on-prem version. You have the right to the cloud version. And then you can be hosted there. So that's where that conversation goes. You start to talk about the different fees. And then there are tools available that we utilize, and I think other hosting partners utilize, that can do a pretty good job of looking at your current environment so we can get very accurate costing for you if you want to move into a hosted service and be able to say, here's what your monthly fee would be for that hosting because of the different architectures and system needs you would have. But it is truly a journey. So you can move to CSP, you can move directly to a SaaS solution, or you can move into a hosted model and then into a SaaS solution. It depends what works best for your business.
As I recall, just to go back to one of the points you made, when it came to the ability to transition to CSP and have that flexibility in what your licensing is applied to, I guess is maybe one way to describe it. That was a big change in what Microsoft was, I guess, allowing partners to offer, right?
It was a huge change, yeah. And that's a very beneficial program for existing customers because it's a pretty good rate that there is. And I believe, I'm not an expert in this area, but I believe there's at least a 2-year, maybe up to 3-year, I can't remember how long that subscription lasts, that you can subscribe to. So it's a very good way to change your BREP, your renewal, into a CSP, a monthly bill, and then have cloud access. So if you haven't looked at that, you should absolutely look at that as a client, and your partners will hopefully talk to you about that. That offer is available when you are set to renew. So when you're getting within that 90 days of renewal, it's a conversation you want to have and see if that's the right business model for you.
Just one other detail I'm thinking of when it comes to a move to Business Central. Do you find that when you're moving from like GP to Business Central, that is the conversation usually focused on SaaS there, or does Business Central, like privately hosted, also come into the picture?
That's a good question, Jason. Most of our conversations have dealt with SaaS because if you're making that move, by and large, 80+% of our clients could fit directly into SaaS. You wouldn't have to take your environment. You wouldn't turn out red on the assessment, for example. So many ISVs have gone from GP into Business Central already. So much of the functionality in Business Central is quite comparable to GP and a lot has been added over the course of time. So it's a remarkably powerful solution. It has a huge installation base. And so it's proven. And it's proven not just in one market, but it's proven across the globe in different geographies that it runs in. So by and large, I would say 80% of our conversations are a direct move to Business Central hosted by Microsoft. But there is the option for the other 20% that have unique needs or something is different where that may be an infrastructure move of their GP system.
Jen, let me bring you back in here. Is there anything else about assessments that we're missing or that's worth mentioning here in terms of, I don't know, modules or the ISV question?
Again, with that assessment tool that we have created, we always talk about what a customer is using, what modules they're using, but it's also a great way for us to find out what ISVs they're using and then seeing what kind of mapping we have. Like Chad said, there's tons of ISVs that are ISV for GP and they're also ISV for Business Central. So there's some linking going on between the applications that a customer is using in GP versus Business Central, which for a customer who is moving off of GP, that's kind of a good, that's a great feeling for them because they already know the type of apps that ISV is providing, and they'll know that same type of ISV application is available in Business Central. So what we do is we actually do look and take a snapshot of those different ISVs that the customer has installed, and we look to see the data that's in in regards to those ISVs and get that type of information. And then when we have those conversations, we can talk to the customer and say, hey, we see that you're using this ISV. The great news is that same ISV is available for Business Central. And then we can kind of work them through that process. We also can see the size of their database. So as we move a customer into Business Central, we have a good idea of what kind of data we'll be moving across using the migration tool. And then we also are keeping track of the industry that they're in. So when they fill out that assessment form that Chad was talking about earlier, we ask them that type of question and say, hey, what kind of industry are you in? And what we want to do with that information down the road is, as we build out not only the assessment tool and the migration tool, but we want to be able to have some really nice packaging for a customer that's going to move across from GP to Business Central and give them a flavor of Business Central that's very uniform across the industry. So as we see maybe the professional services industry or the non-for-profit industry, we want to be able to help them make that Business Central application personal to their industry. So we're working on creating packages to deliver that type of information during the installation and creation of their Business Central tent.
Okay, what are some of the phases or steps that go into making that a reality? Is some of that, finding the right ISVs, the right, modules that can become part of that?
Yep, exactly. So when we look at Business Central, there's some really great products out there that are geared towards specific industries. So we've been working with a lot of those specific types of ISVs to make sure that when a customer, let's just say, for example, again, it's the retail industry, that we have a comprehensive list of the different ISVs that are available. And then we can have those conversations with the customer and have those conversations with the ISVs. So we've got some really good ISV programs within Enavate as well, where we've got these relationships built so we can go directly to that ISV and they can help us through the process of getting that customer up and running using those ISVs. So we're not just loading the product and then walking away. We're actually helping them along with that ISV to get their application up and running.
Chad, you mentioned migration factories, a migration factory approach, I think a little while ago. What is that, and who's it for?
Yeah, very good question. So the Migration Factory is a program that Microsoft has put together. And the goal of the Migration Factory is to identify a set of partners that have the experience in migrating the clients, have the capacity to migrate clients, but more importantly, that are able to do this on behalf of the partner of record. So the goal isn't to go out and try to aggregate a bunch of different clients into your organization. It's to say, okay, partner, if you have clients that are ready to make the move to Business Central, and perhaps you don't have the capacity to do that at the moment, and or it's not been a practice that you've ramped up, but you're still the best partner for that client in the long term, you can utilize these Migration Factory partners like Enavate to do the work. We will take that client, we will migrate them into Business Central, we'll work with you as the business expert for that client, get everything set up, and then you remain the partner of record for that particular client and carry on with your work for them. So that's the goal of the Migration Factory, is really to help this movement, to help all the partners and all the clients that Microsoft has in the GP space, for example, to be able to make that switch and handle the volume and handle the work that's there. So it's very easy to get in touch with one of the Migration Factory partners, and we're all set up and geared to help clients and to help partners with their clients make that move.
Should we talk maybe about some of the migration tooling? What's available now, and how do you use it for a quick migration, Jen?
Within the Business Central application, by default, there is a GP migration tool that allows a customer to migrate their GP data. There's a few things that, as a customer is looking, first of all, we'd want to make sure that they run the assessment so we can really evaluate if the migration tool will work for them. But what we look at is the version of GP that they're on. So any supported version of GP within the GP realm would be supported when they're doing a migration. So GP 2016 or higher And then we also look at some of the data that we migrate across, which we focus right now on GLAPR customers. So that's GLAPAR. Not saying that a customer that has modules outside of that can't migrate, because they can. It might take a little bit more work. And that's, again, where that kind of falls into that green, yellow, and red bucket that Chad and I were talking about earlier. And not only do we bring that data across, but we also bring a lot of the historical data across. So a customer, once they migrate into Business Central, has the ability to see some of that historical information in case a customer would call and they want to talk a little bit more about past transactions that they've done. That information that used to be in GP can now be available inside of Business Central. The migration tool also migrates across inventory items, locations, and then the costing of those different types of items that they have and that they're using. With the release that was done last October, so October of 2020, there was the ability to also run a migration that brings all of your historical data into the Azure Data Lake. And where this really comes into play, and which is super helpful for a GP customer, is if they don't want to maintain their old GP system at all, they have the ability to push all of their data that's in their GP database out into Azure Data Lake. And then from there, they can use different types of reporting tools within the Power Platform, whether it's a Power App, Power Flow, or even Power BI. They can create reports off of that old GP data, and then they have that readily available where they can do comparisons. And so all that information is still available to them, even though they are no longer running their GP environment. We're looking at, hopefully in the future, building out that migration tool even more. I know that there's talk about extending the migration tools. There is also feature functionality inside of the migration tool that allows for custom table mapping. And where that really comes into play and is great for our GP customers is if a customer is using an ISV inside of GP, they can migrate that information over to the same ISV for Business Central if the tables map the same. So we've got several partners, there's several ISVs that have already done that and have that service available. So if they had an ISV inside of GP, the ISV is available in BC. That ISV has actually gone in and done some of the mapping to bring the data across. So when the migration tool is run, it can also map that data into Business Central from their GP data, and they don't lose any of that information when they migrate over to Business Central.
Oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard of that capability before, but yeah, that sounds like it's a huge benefit that certainly gets at one of those big concerns that you certainly hear. I guess you hit on a couple of them just now. There's that, the ISVs, and then there's that historical data. It seems like it's almost a debate over time what to do with historical data.
Right. Yeah. And, and it's funny too, is that, yeah, right. That historical data is super, super important at first, right? Because you've got two different systems. But as you kind of move away from that, and your new historical data is in Business Central, that becomes less and less important. But really for that probably first year when you're trying to do comparison reports, or a customer calls you and they say, hey, I've got questions on these particular types of transactions, you still want that readily available. But if you don't want to have to maintain your old environment, it's a great way to have that data at your fingertips. And the one big benefit of Azure Data Lake too is the cost. It's very, very low cost for the amount of data that you're able to put into the Azure Data Lake.
To add to that, I think Jen made some very, very clear points on where the value is today with the data lake. You no longer need to keep your GP server that might be on its last legs, right? All that data is in the data lake at a very low cost. You can create reports off of that historical data very easily using Power BI or one of the ISV tools like Solver or PopDoc. So everything is available. The untapped part of that is where I think we really believe there's a huge opportunity, and this is what we're talking to more and more clients about, is machine learning. When you get that data into Data Lake, a lot of the machine learning is built to query off of Data Lake. So now we start to open up the possibility, and we're in early days of machine learning. There's certainly a long ways to go in this area, but the potential is there to start to use that historical data to build out better visibility than we can humanly think about in terms of seeing trends, anticipating needs, doing all of those things that we haven't utilized machine learning yet for. But that's when we get back to what is the power of this integrated solution? What is the next generation of digital transformation? This is a big part of it. Putting all that data into a data lake and then being able to query it, machine learn against it. And as you start to grow your business in Business Central, you can imagine, and I assume there will be plans to put more of that data out there. So now you can meld all of that historical data and use it for more than just query capability, but use it to predict what's going to happen next in your organization. That's a frontier that partners should be really excited about. Certainly customers are starting to get excited about, and that there's a huge greenfield space to really develop against.
That really gets to one of the biggest debate points, I would say, when it comes to moving companies to Business Central from GP or another older ERP, is that, where's the real value? And I think we started by talking about sort of pain points that often initiate this discussion, but I think there's also that whole other side of it. We've sort of touched on it from various angles during this conversation, but the opportunities for new and more valuable capabilities on the other side of the project or of the process of a migration, that it's more than just getting off of old software, right?
It's absolutely more than that. And I think you've brought up a great point there, Jason, that we know some of the key attributes. We know what some of the folks are immediately finding. Jen mentioned dimensions, for example. The moment you move your chart of accounts from GP into Business Central through the migration tool and you fire up dimensions, it's a wow moment for those in the accounting department. And that's immediate. There's no other need. There's nothing else you have to do. It just works. And then you start to look at, what else can I do? What else can I do that's already in there with the Teams integration? How can I collaborate better? That's a moment in time that is there for you right now, the moment you migrate. But then you look at, what can I do beyond that? And how can I leverage this data that I've accumulated over time, not just to find a customer's invoice when they call me, but to anticipate what's going to happen with a product line because it fits a pattern of another product line. And I can start to forecast better and I can do better. There's all kinds of things that you can start to do then. And that's where, I get a little excited about this, and our clients get excited about it when we start to talk about the possibilities of what Dataverse, what data lake, and all of the machine learning and AI can do as we progress and as we mature in this field. And that's where you really start to harness even more of the power beyond the first immediate top 10 things that you get.
When I think about, when you mentioned Dataverse, Data Lake, they might sound like scary terms or inaccessible things, but it's amazing how far that's come over the last few years with the use of data lakes and how, I don't think companies that, a few years ago, companies that and GP or even Nav would have ever thought their company would have a data lake. It probably didn't register. And now that it's been used for a couple of years at this point as kind of one of the core components of the enterprise ERP at Microsoft with F&O. And so it's really interesting to see it coming in here in the sort of at the Business Central level too, as probably a very important element.
If you, if anybody on the podcast here has a chance, the Business Applications Group just did their big summit just a couple days ago. And it was a lot, Jason, about what you just talked about, Dataverse, Power App, Power Platform, and how people are using that today. Not what they're going to do with it next, but what they've done during the last 6 months and the innovations they've had with really low code, no code. So that's where you can hire some newer team members. You can ask some people to ramp up on that, and you can build point apps very quickly using all that data that's there. So you're absolutely correct. The last 2 years have been just monumental in the development of those areas, and the tools are ready. Migrating to the cloud gets you access to that the day that you are migrated and gets you the ability to leverage that within your organization. So we're talking tiny bit about futuristic things, but these futuristic things, many of them are here already. So it is time, if you're even thinking about it, it's time to take a look at it and see how quickly you can get there so that you can leverage these new business opportunities.
I also imagine it keeps you and your team on alert about just the type of assessment. Assessments are going to change too, right, Jen? As I guess the underlying products themselves change and some of the supporting technologies.
That's our big vision is this is a phased approach. We started off little, but we are going to continue to grow this out. And we just want to make it better and better. So as we learn more about our customers, we can make the tool better. We can expand it across different products as well. So it won't be just more GP focused, but maybe this will also drive other conversations within the organizations as to not only what they would need for an ERP solution, but it could drive, what types of apps do we want to create? What kind of reports do we want to create? It really will drive a lot of things that, will be around that cloud solution just in general, not just the ERP solution.
All right. Excellent. Anything else you wanted to make sure we talk about here before we wrap up? This has been a lot of fun, and it's been great to catch up on all these different efforts and how they've evolved.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and I think I would go back to there's a lot to learn about that migration to cloud and moving your organization to cloud, but there's also been a lot of folks that have paved the trail already. So this isn't a new situation. You wouldn't have to be the pioneer in this case because we've had a lot of clients that have migrated from on-premise to a cloud solution, which has taught us how to do assessments to make it a clearer path, which has taught us how to enhance the migration tool to make that an easier path, which has taught us how to identify the top 10 things that the users should take advantage of day one of landing in the cloud, as well as how executives and leaders of those organizations should think about how to leverage that in ways that they couldn't even really imagine before. So we're not in the beginning of this journey. We're a few steps into the journey, and it's ready. It's ready for you as a client to look at it. It's ready for you as a partner to look at it. And there are people out there like us here at Enavate that are ready to help. And so it shouldn't be something to think about, in a year from now. It should be something to think about today and think, what am I missing if I haven't at least evaluated my options to move and what it would take me to move to a cloud solution and leverage all these great tools.
Chad, Jen, thank you both so much for taking the time to chat. It's been a lot of fun. And I imagine if we connect again in 12 months or 18 months, it's going to be a lot of new things to talk about then.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you, Jason. Well done. Thank you for guiding us through it again.
Yeah,
my pleasure.
Thanks so much for the invite. We totally appreciate being able to spend some time with you.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Jennifer Ranz and Chad Sogge of Enavate for joining me today. To learn more about cloud migration, technology, and options, visit the Enavate blog, www.enavate.com/blog. And that's it for this episode. If you want to reach me, you can send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. You can also follow all of our activity on Twitter and LinkedIn. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.